Alright, we are back with more NFL coverage and a few more developments before the start of the draft next week. So, to get things started off, the Raiders would sign Devin White to a one-year contract earlier on in this stretch of time. Given the fact that they did lose a guy like Divine Diablo, it makes sense for them to pick up an asset like Devin White. Obviously, there have been deficiencies in his game all over the board. He can be an inconsistent tackler, and his coverage has certainly left a little bit to be desired at times. He's also gotten weaker rushing the passer, but by and large, there's still an opportunity for him to be a good rotational piece for some team out there. He did make one Pro Bowl appearance with the Bucs, but after that season, there was just a severe drop-off. Injuries were not the entire reason for his decline. I mean, he did miss a boatload of time last season, so they're definitely going to be monitoring that. Even still, in 7 games, and not even getting as many starts as he used to, he would pick up just 19 tackles on the season. No sacks, no pass deflections, nothing. So the Raiders better really hope that they can get things back to at least a serviceable standard for Devin White. Because not only Divine Diablo, but to take that one and lose Robert Spillane earlier in the offseason at the same position. Huge downgrade if Devin White doesn't, at the very least, turn back the clock a little bit. A little crazy to say, given that he's just 27 years old. But they're going to need him to become a pretty good linebacker again. As if he doesn't, that's a huge miss on their part. Moving on to the Ravens, and they would decide to sign John Harbaugh to a 3-year contract extension with the Ravens. It makes sense, despite all that we can say about John Harbaugh, what we can't deny is that he has been, to this point, he's still one of the more accomplished head coaches in the league from an active standpoint. But the fact that they have not won a championship in NFL, a Super Bowl, since 2012, leaves a lot to be desired, especially in the city of Baltimore, of course. From just terrible decision making. That's really become the focus of why certain fans, and I guess just different people all around the situation, want him to be gone. Because some of these, like whether it comes to time management, with usage of the timeouts and things like that before half, or whether it comes to the usage of different personnel, there are multiple games across the last few seasons where you just are left scratching your head at what the hell he just pulled off in a given moment. But the fact of the matter is that they are still a winning franchise. And when you have a head coach with that kind of reputation, I suppose, you're going to want to be as loyal to him as possible. It's also worth noting that they lost Mike McDonald. Another thank you to them for gifting the Seahawks Mike McDonald, of course. But outside of that, you don't really have a contingency plan for a head coach on your own team at the moment. So they're outside of Mike McDonald. There just wasn't a way for you to really build upon that. You had no contingency plan in place. And then in terms of how things were looking on the head coaching cycle, I can't imagine that any of the head coaches on the market would have been individuals they wanted to pick up for that position. Because you have to think about this from the Ravens' perspective. If you go on and search through head coaches across the league that are without a job right now, can you definitively say that any of them are better options for you, even if they offer a little bit of potential? Are any of them truly better options for you than what John Harbaugh has been for you over the past 17 years? Probably not. So from that standpoint, it makes sense. But it'll definitely hurt if they can't make the most out of this. Continue making AFC Championship appearances. Get a Super Bowl during this time. If he can't, then I don't know if he will see another contract in a similar vein from this squad. I'll tell you that right now. Moving on to the signing of Christian Benford by the Bills. They re-signed him on a 4-year, $76 million deal after his work last season as a, secondary cornerback. In light of missing out on Tre'Davious White and letting him go last offseason, the Bills are definitely trying to recoup that a little bit with just good overall production. Obviously, with having Kyle go down due to injury earlier on, that didn't help their cause. But in comes Christian Benford alongside guys like Russell Douglas, and he had literally his best career season to date, getting a forced fumble recovery along with a couple of forced fumbles, 2 interceptions, and more tackles than he had ever accrued, while also nabbing a sack as well. He actually got recognition for the Defensive Player of the Year, finishing 22nd on that list. His coverage was pretty fucking good, to say the least. And again, in missing out on one of the better cover corners, to get that back and have a replacement of sorts that develop that soon, you gotta compound on that opportunity. He's a 24-year-old right now, will be 25 at the start of the season. So a 4-year deal is pretty solid. You would have to revisit this again if you intend to, right in the middle of his potential prime. You know, and it's not necessarily like you're paying him as an excessive contract for his standard. I mean, he's a relatively respected cornerback in this league. Now, do I consider him necessarily elite? Sure, I'd have to see a little more. But I like the move for the Bills. You've got to compound on that opportunity. There's just no other way for me to say that. The Texans would sign special teamer E.J. Speed away from the Colts. Even with him being a special teamer, though, especially in the beginning of his career, he did have a career year last season. I don't know what the Colts' intentions were in terms of keeping him or not, per se. But if it was a true contract year for him, I suppose they truly got this man to lock in. He had 142 tackles in 15 games, along with an interception, 5 pass deflections, and 7 TFLs. One of the better seasons, if not the best season by far, he's had. Now, granted, the Colts defense overall, they were a pretty solid unit. So you have to ask yourself, if you are the Texans taking him on, is he really all that good of an individual talent? They're probably going to need him to be. I mean, their linebacker situation is pretty good as well, which is why I don't know why the Colts decided to let him move interconference to another squad if they were genuinely trying to have him leave. The Texans are just stacked in their linebacker core. Did they forget that Christian Harris is still there? Henry Toto is an individual that can be on the rise. Azeez Al-Shire, when he wasn't being one of the dirtiest players out there, is a pretty solid get for them. And then now you bring in E.J. Speed as another rotational piece with the potential to do that in their system. I mean, depending on how the Colts operate, though, they might not miss him all too much. I think they could recoup that pretty well, especially if this just wasn't a one-season fluke for this defense. If they've actually got a legitimate system there, bringing in another solid linebacker to have him at least be on par with what he did last season, I don't think they're going to miss him too much. The more important get was to retain Zaire Franklin, which I believe they ended up doing. So all in all, you're going to be okay. All right. The Stanford Cardinal would actually make a move for a former NFL head coach. Frank Reich had obviously been out of things for a little while after being fired by the Panthers in 22. And he'd really just been taking up other, menial coaching positions, I suppose. But in light of how the hell the Cardinal did last college football season, and the fact that different front office personnel in Stanford were actively, at this point, and I think they still are, being investigated for doing some really fucked up stuff, they decided that it was time for a change, and under Andrew Luck's guidance as the now general manager of the program, he would decide to go after Frank Reich and hire him on a 1-year contract as a placeholder coaching figure for a program that is desperately looking to be rebuilding. It has been a while since Stanford has been a respected football organization. Let's just put it like they've not. I ain't gonna lie to you, since Christian McCaffrey left, they haven't done anything of note. Their quarterback situations, from JT Daniels and the like to other individuals, I think they had Lamson play for a little bit. They had KJ Costello for a while. Just terrible quarterback after terrible quarterback coming to that organization. Doesn't help matters. So recruiting is definitely one aspect of it that's going to have to improve. It might be a while before that gets better, though, because now you're in the ACC, and different schools like Clemson, like North Carolina, even Duke to an extent, will probably see more, eyes from potential recruits than you will. This is just the start of a brand new era in Stanford. So it's going to be a little bit of time before they can get back to the mountaintop. But if Reich can give them a good year, a pretty great year that exceeds all expectations, maybe they decide to extend him for a little more after that. They're really just testing the waters here. And it's much better than just settling for just terrible season after terrible season. So I like the direction that they're headed in. We'll just have to see what Frank Reich can do. Clearly, the Browns don't necessarily like the direction they're headed in. And things got so bad that I guess at some point last month, over this stretch of the time that I didn't cover, Jimmy Haslam and his wife would hold a press conference talking about the state of the team, essentially. And I guess he was asked a few questions, but somewhere in there he made quite the obvious admission. Now, I think that it's a little too late for him to say it, but he did verbally admit to having many a regret about the Deshaun Watson trade. I guess sooner rather than later you would like him to recognize this, but why did you not ask any questions at the time? You saw all of the controversy surrounding this man with the 24 cases or allegation, I guess not suits, but all of that was being levied against him into an overall overarching case being built up against him on the daily. Allegation upon allegation from different women, just stacking up so consistently. And still, somewhere in your mind, you decided to give him a fully guaranteed contract on a 5-year deal worth like $46.2 million or so. Why would you do that? That just did not make any lick of sense. The fact that you signed him and literally gave him a guarantee that he would be the Browns quarterback for the near future in such a controversial moment already raised eyebrows right then and there. And you had nothing to question then. You had nothing to regret then. Now you see just how cap-strapped you are and how bleak the future looks for this team, especially given the fact that Deshaun Watson has now suffered multiple season-ending injuries, essentially. Because, bro, I don't care what type of breakthrough happens. The fact that he had that kind of setback earlier on in the year, he is not coming back. He's not coming back this season. I guarantee you. And even if he does come back, he just has played like absolute shit. Literally. For a quarterback that most people did believe was going to be one of the faces of the NFL, I guess, once upon a time, his entire career with Cleveland has left so little to be desired. He hasn't even played more than 7 games in any one of these seasons. At all. Over this time, he's had just 19 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, man. He had a 5-1 record to start off 2023, but that's attributed more to how good that defense was in the early stretch of that season. And that's the thing, too. It's been consistent that the defense will have some ups and downs, but at the end of the day, they do try their absolute hardest to hold down the fort. But when your offense is repeatedly not giving you the aid you need in the moment, you're naturally going to crumble on that side of the ball. And that's what ended up happening. Now you see all this in play, with injuries piling up for him, with just terrible play at the quarterback position, and now no money to really use and allocate towards other free agents that you might be pursuing. Now you regret it. Like, that's just so fucking crazy. It's like, come on, man. We being serious? Like, what? Nah, man. Like, don't switch that up now. Because it just makes you look very, very fucking bad. Seriously. The Panthers would sign return specialist Raheem Blackshear, and the Patriots would decide to induct former head coach for the team, Bill Parcells, into their Hall of Fame. Makes absolute sense. He is a legend through and through. Not only did he lead the Patriots at that time out of absolute fucking hell. Seriously. Like, early 1990s Patriots were just not a great team at all. They could not build a capable roster to save their lives. But he would come in for them and turn them around relatively quickly, eventually turning them into an AFC champion in 1996 before losing the Super Bowl to the Packers, and also giving way to Bill Belichick, which is where I think this really comes in at. You can look at the record and say that, yes, he did go 32-32 with this team. But at the same time, he ended his tenure with the franchise on a relative high note. And if a few things went well for him in that particular Super Bowl, he could have won it. Also, the fact that Bill Belichick was his understudy for that much time, and then he makes his way over to the Patriots under the supervision, I believe, of Bill Parcells. And then Belichick comes in and does what he does with that dynasty. You can't not credit Parcells with that. So there's just a mutual respect there on both sides. I think it's well deserved. Not necessarily the team he's best known with, I suppose. But, you know, you will give him his due for sure. There were a few official changes to the NFL structure and rule system made after the annual league meeting on March 30th. A couple that stand out would be that the dynamic kickoffs were going to be made a permanent staple of the game, and they would once more move up the touchback line again. Now they are at the 35-yard line. I just can't really get behind it. I don't know what it is. Like, the whole notion of a 2-minute offense really changes completely. Like, yes, we're literally talking about a difference of 15 yards with a dynamic kickoff. Now, 10 to 15 yards. When, before this shit even got implemented into the league, or they even attempted to test this out, you just had the standard 75-yard drive following a touchback. There was something to those in particular. I just don't get why you want to just shorten the field like that. And then like even with dynamic kickoffs being implemented mainly to promote safety, you do understand just how frequently touchbacks are going to take place and how frequently they have been taken. Like that was the issue to start out the year last year, and it maintained a similar trajectory by the end of the season. Like, did they not note that overall returns were down because people were just settling for touchbacks? Or the, I guess, length and overall distance in the kick went so far for most of these kickers that they forced touchbacks on their own accord. There wasn't even any action going on. Rarely did you see an individual player be able to put their full skills in the return game on display, even though there were a few return touchdowns throughout the course of the season. But I just don't like it. I can't get behind it, man. It's like just like literally just keep touchbacks to where they advance to the 25-yard line. Like I don't appreciate all of that. I just don't like the move, man. It's just not optimal. It's not optimal. Like, keeping players' health in order is understood. But to increase the distance of the touchback line by that much, just takes away another element of the game. And I mean, even from the standpoint of, because I guess one particular group of people would probably want to vote on a rule like this to be implemented simply because they think that drives last too long and they want to see more offensive possessions for both sides. But again, once more, you're taking so much away from the defensive side of the ball by doing this as well. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, you're just giving the offense even more of an advantage by giving them a shorter field to work with. Even if it is just a difference of a few yards. A lot of the penalties do already favor the offense. You're giving them a shorter distance to work with on the field. What's going to be next? You cannot keep on trying to put the defense at a disadvantage like this. That's got to change around. Like, seriously. Like, it seems like you would naturally have both sides of the ball going out there and trying to best one another. But the offense just has that in their back pocket now. Literally, in a game that's supposed to be chess for both parties in coaching, with the personnel on the field trying to diagnose a play at any one time. Like, all it would take from the 35-yard line is literally just one play. And if you have a kicker with a strong enough leg, you're already in field goal range. It's like, I don't know. Another thing that would be implemented is that the overtime rule, in which they would grant possession to both teams in the regular season in overtime, they actually passed that one too. I already explained how much I like that one in the last free agency video I covered. I don't even need to go through that whole tangent again. But again, once more, just more offensive possessions from both teams. Same logic here. But I'm like, you have to work for that. You can't just be granted that. There is something traditional and pretty good for the overall product about staking your claim to some aspect in order to achieve victory by the end. You've got to put in the work behind the scenes to get out there in the first place, by and large. And then all of that extra work behind the scenes in terms of preparation and practice gets displayed every Sunday and Mondays sometimes, and Wednesdays sometimes, and Thursdays sometimes, and Fridays sometimes, and Saturdays sometimes. That's what all of that leads to. So how is it that all of that work, especially when it comes to situational football as well, all of that work just gets cast aside because you want to allow teams to just have it and be given that opportunity rather than work for the right to get an extra possession in overtime? Like, what? That's just so fucked up. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, I definitely sound like a bit of a hater overall, I guess. But I guess these rules I just don't particularly care for. I've been saying this. This is not necessarily me just coming up with some brand new, like, I guess, take on it. This is what I've been saying with these. So, you know, I just really... And then we're right back at it because they wouldn't necessarily vote on this. But what would happen is that they would come to a consensus and they would allow the rule on potentially banning the tush push to be pushed back to another date. Some people understood it, but a lot of people were talking about it no matter how you slice it. And again, it's just dumb. It's dumb. Like, bro, every single one of these niggas that wants to vote it out, they are literally just salty that they can't stop the fucking play. Like, seriously. Yes, player safety, like the dynamic kickoffs, account for. Obviously, you have to try to protect that in the best way you can. But I'm here to tell you right now that pretty much any play you can think of offers an opportunity for multiple players even, to get injured. So yes, health and safety, yes. Player safety, sure. But we need to stop, like, honestly, that's becoming a bit of a buzz phrase at this point. We understand that that's the case. But if we want to be technical about it, there are plays that don't involve that kind of formation on the field for any group of players to be lined up in. There are some injuries that happen that are non-contact and are away from the play. And there are multiple situations where players are just trying to run routine routes and make routine cuts or so on pretty standard fucking play calls that every team uses out there. And they get hurt. So just because that happens, we're going to ban those standard plays? I mean, like, Kyle Brandt was one of the individuals in the media who ended up talking about it on Good Morning Football at some point in the immediate aftermath of this move, and he made a really good point. From his understanding, the quarterback sneak has actually seen a higher percentage in the potential of injuries than the tush push has. Quarterback sneaks have been used for decades now. And they offer more of a chance for a player to get injured than the tush push does. But again, we're not going to ban the quarterback sneak because it's a standard play call. And the tush push is literally in and of itself a quarterback sneak on most occasions. It's literally in the same family of play right there. Literally. So what? They just stack the box and account for a forward push. It's the same thing. It looks a little different because it's unique to the Philadelphia game plan. It's unique to the personnel that they have. If you feel as though you can't stop it, stop crying. Get the personnel on your respective teams to stop it because it's not impossible to stop. Multiple teams have stopped it. Get those players in your trenches who can get in there and jam things up so that you can dampen their effectiveness even more. They don't have a perfect percentage with this, but obviously they do have a pretty high clip over the past few seasons since they've implemented this thing, whether we're converting third downs or fourth downs. And now they have also implemented a sort of formation for this. They pulled off a fucking play action pass out of that set. That shit can get a little crazy. But by and large, it is a quarterback sneak at its core. So if we're not going to ban the quarterback sneak, even though there's a higher likelihood of getting hurt in those, then we're not going to ban the tush push. And again, similar sentiment with any play call that's unique to a team. I mean, bro, you will literally allow double reverse passes. You will allow many RPO plays because that's honestly been incorporated into the game with the multiple spread offenses that took college football by storm. That's a part of the game. You're not going to remove that now. Even if certain RPO plays may pose more of an injury threat than your standard play call. And then the amount of trick plays, like the Wildcat, you have no problems with retaining that. Even though you would have your fucking quarterback out wide in that play. with the potential for an incoming defender to light his ass up as he attempts to block. The logic is just dumb with this shit, man. Alright, they would announce, the NFL, that they would incorporate statistics from the All-American Football Conference. I believe they were active during the very late 40s, and they were able to poach some talent from the NFL during this time. Obviously, that posed a tremendous challenge to them, but they did end up producing some pretty good historical talents. I guess for a while, though, with whatever quote-unquote beef or grudge the NFL held with the AAFC for just challenging them like this, they didn't necessarily account for their statistics or any of their record books for that matter. That would change, as you would have them make that announcement earlier on in the month. There would be a long-standing quote from none other than Jerry Jones during the annual league meeting that would make all the waves and even catch Micah Parsons off guard in the immediate aftermath. But I'm just going to do the deed of reading the full quote here. Alright, as he states, end quote, relating to the potential contract for Micah Parsons. End quote. We're there. I don't view it as urgent as all. Some say using the basis that the earlier you get something done, the cheaper. Well, the earlier you get something done, a lot of the time, the more mistakes you make. You might want to see a few more cards played, not just with that particular negotiation, but the whole team. I know I'm kind of being a little defensive here, but the idea that the only success is getting a contract done at an early time is incorrect. I'd rather pay more and get it right than pay less and screw it up. You can screw it up real good. You can go too early and misread athletic ability. You can misread availability for the future. You can get a lot of things screwed up by going early, but any contract that's worth noting, as you well know, it takes two to have an agreement. But more importantly, 9 times out of 10, if I wanted to close it, I'd close it. And we don't, because I'm looking for other cards to be played. End quote. What the fuck? It's not entirely bad, but my goodness here. Let's dissect this shit, shall we? The earlier you do get something done, sure, there is a potential for mistakes. Any contract poses that. Any contract has room to fail at any given moment. Things just happen sometimes. Things aren't always so crystal clear and linear. Like that's expected. But most of the time, and especially within the past decade alone, yes, the earlier you get something done, the cheaper it tends to be. There have been multiple points, literally over the course of this offseason, over the course of last offseason, and the offseason before that, and the offseason before that, where the market will reset so fucking much and flip so consistently that when you eventually pay your guy, the market resetting that much makes it look like a pretty damn good contract. And at least sets some sort of standard for another team to follow. Waiting too late to make something happen in a climate where the market resets that consistently is going to force you to pay way more than you anticipated. But let's hold. You might want to see a few more cards played. Not just with that particular negotiation, but with the whole team. We're specifically talking about Micah Parsons here. So let's get at that. Myles Garrett, Danielle Hunter, as well, are two of the highest paid edge rushers in the league. And then Jamar Chase also got his contract that made him the highest paid player who wasn't a quarterback at the time in NFL history per year based on salary in the span of just a few days. So you're watching all of that go down and play out, and little do you know, for whatever reason, you actually have to get down to the brass tacks and pay him. Micah Parsons we're referring to. You're going to have to pay him. And now, in doing all of that, you're likely going to have to give him the highest ever contract for a non-quarterback in NFL history. Yeah, sure, it might be worth it, but oh my gosh. Like, if you think, because at this point, you should have an idea that Micah Parsons is the guy for you, especially after getting rid of DeMarcus Lawrence. After seeing DeMarvion Overshown go down with a season-ending injury last season. He is your core edge rusher right now. And he deserves to be paid immediately. How much more do you need to see from him? Like, yes, while some of the off-the-field antics with him might be a little off-putting at times, you cannot deny that he has produced. He's been a Pro Bowler in every single season. He's made the All-Pro first team in his first 2 seasons. And he had a second team All-Pro in 23. The fact that we can say that 24 was a down year for him, despite putting up a pass deflection, forcing 2 fumbles, still retaining 12 sacks, and still nabbing 12 TFLs, is ridiculous. So he's clearly the guy. Also, you can attribute that to the fact that he played just 13 games and the entire Cowboys defense was just an absolute disaster waiting to happen. They were a dumpster fire on that side of the football for the entire season. They could not get it together as a unit, and he still had the individual capabilities to show you what he's worth. So I don't know how, literally, what more would you have to see at that point, Jerry Jones? How many more things do you need to wait on? How many more cards do you need to see being played? Because, to be honest, this is a situation you could have settled before the start of last season with him coming into his 4th year. And the market for any edge rusher and what it was at that point in time has been eviscerated by this point. In just the span of a few days earlier on in this free agency period. Seriously. So I don't understand. And then I'd rather pay more and get it right than pay less and screw it up. Literally, last offseason, you saw quarterback after quarterback after quarterback after quarterback after quarterback after quarterback get paid big time money up until just before the start of that season last year to pay Dak Prescott a $60 million per year contract. Everyone knew that was an egregious overpay, but you had no choice because you had no contingency plan at the quarterback position. Dak Prescott was literally the best quarterback you had to choose from at this point. And yet, as mediocre as you've been with him, you're giving him that kind of money without any sort of guarantee that you're going to make a Super Bowl run. Because he has never shown you that he was capable of doing such a thing. And he'd been largely inconsistent. That was the prime example last year. In a normal situation, if you handled this earlier on, you could probably have paid him below the market. But instead, you just exploded the reach of the quarterback market. You completely blew it up. And you alone reset it by a mile. Not to mention as well that you had to wait for that much time also to give CeeDee Lamb a shit ton of money, with him being just in the upper echelon of wide receivers in the market last season. And clearly, with what ended up happening, you could not have believed that you truly got it right by paying more that late. Because by saying that he had to pay less and screw it up, or that he would rather pay more and get it right than pay less and screw it up, he literally screwed it up. Both of their contracts had to get restructured. This offseason, both of them, so that they could come in and try to acquire some more talent, in which they've done a poor job of doing. But that's a different conversation for another day. So yeah, it's terrible. And even Micah Parsons understands it, because with some of his quotes later, he talks about the fact that Jerry Jones would be signing off on it and that Micah Parsons would be agreeing to it. But Micah Parsons felt slighted by that, because he's been working with an owner in David Milageta that has negotiated pretty massive contracts for a lot of players around the league. So Parsons put out a post saying essentially that he wouldn't do any sort of deal without David Milageta involved. So now we are potentially at another standstill. And again, this is a situation that could have been handled last year. But no, you overpay for Dak Prescott, and you get yourself in a highly binding contract with CeeDee Lamb to the point where you don't even have enough anymore for Micah Parsons, apparently. It's like, it's just so dumb. Calais Campbell would re-sign with the Cardinals, going back to his very first NFL team on a one-year deal. The Cowboys would also just double up the stupidity by getting Joe Milton III from New England in a trade that sent a 5th-round pick to the Patriots as well. Like, yes, you want to have a backup plan, I suppose, especially with losing Cooper Rush earlier in this time. But a 5th-round pick for a guy in Joe Milton that is already 25 years old, and that hasn't really gotten a lot of playing time like that. You're banking on a lot here with him. It might not be the biggest deal, but at the same time, dude, like, what the hell? I don't understand. Like, just think about this. You saw 5th-round value in a player that got drafted later on in the 6th round. That's just... And again, he hasn't necessarily... Like, yes, the one game he had was pretty good. But you think that's enough to increase his overall value by a full round? The Chiefs would sign Mike Edwards once again on a one-year deal. They had him before. One of the craziest situations out there. I guess you just can't get enough. The Raiders would sign Geno Smith to a 2-year, $75 million contract extension that could reach $85.5 million if he hits certain requirements that will lead to incentive bonuses. There were rumors going around essentially that they wanted to try and get an extension done. Pete Carroll talked about it as well. So honestly, a 2-year deal, if you think that Geno Smith is your guy for the very near future, yeah, I definitely can understand that. And honestly, in Geno Smith's case, if $37.5 million a year is what he was looking for, he got his money. You got to respect it. The Cardinals would re-sign Trey McBride to a 4-year, $75 million contract extension, or $76 million contract extension. That would make him the highest paid tight end in NFL history by average salary. He had a very great season last year, and that alone allowed him to pitch in his bid for a new deal. You see that? Jerry Jones? That's how you do it. Now, yes, has he gotten off to the same start as Micah Parsons had? Yes, we're talking about different positions. No, in terms of production, he hadn't really done too much in his first season, but he did ascend in his second year with a full season, and in his third season, things came to a head, and they decided to capitalize on it right then and right there. Again, naturally, we don't necessarily know for sure what will happen with Trey McBride. Anything could happen. Anything. And you know what? They still grew some fucking balls and decided to just make the fucking move. Sometimes that's what matters. Yes, you have to be calculated with your decision making, but there are some moments in time where you just have to fire a move and just hope and believe that it works. Like, not every NFL superstar was acquired with such a sure mind. You could imagine that many people surrounding these players had their doubts, and yet they worked their way up to superstar status to where teams invested deeper into them earlier in their careers. And look where that has gotten some of these teams now. Both good and bad. It's a part of the game. You cannot just play scared the entire time. Because if you do that, even with all of the potential external obstacles out there, you will most certainly miss out on some trend. And you're going to fall all the way behind. Like the Cowboys have done right now. Now, the Cardinals have a lot more to worry about than just Trey McBride. But to shore up their tight end position for at least the next 4 years is a pretty damn good move. And smart. Julio Jones has been one of the better receivers in the NFL for quite some time. His prime was something where you just had to be there to see it develop, honestly. You had to be in the moment to watch it all play out. It was something really spectacular. I'm not going to lie to you. Yes, I'm saying this as a Seahawks fan that got crushed by him in the 2016 divisional round. Crushed our asses. But, yes. Obviously, in Atlanta, he was just a force to be reckoned with for the great majority of his tenure there, nabbing 7 Pro Bowl appearances, and also making 5 All-Pro teams, including 2 All-Pro first team selections. After that age 30 season in Atlanta, though, things just tailed off for him completely. Injuries, with the amount of physicality he played with at the position, they started to take its toll on him. And eventually he was moved to the Titans, where he would just see his role continue to regress, putting up just 434 yards and 31 catches along with a single touchdown in this season. He tried his luck in Tampa to potentially get a ring and also just play alongside Tom Brady. And things got even worse for him there, just starting in 5 games and missing 7 due to more injuries that in this season saw him decrease to just 299 yards with 24 catches. The Eagles' year in 2023 is quite literally just a season where he decided to bow out. I mean, 74 yards in 3 touchdowns on 11 catches. His mobility out there wasn't even remotely the same. And honestly, if we're looking at that, so many just short yardage situations for an individual that could once not only dominate you physically at the line of scrimmage and beat you off the press, but he had such blistering speed at his size as well, standing at 6'3", 220. He could literally dart past you. And now he's being relegated to a short yardage possession wide receiver. truly it was done from there. So he would be out of the NFL for the entirety of 2024 as just a general free agent with no particular news circulating around him. And then we would get the news earlier in the month that he would choose to retire after a pretty storied career and 13 seasons. Majority of them being very, very productive. But by the end of it, you could tell why he had to just move on with other ventures. When all is said and done, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I do believe that at this current point, he will be a Hall of Famer. Even with an end that wasn't as amicable for his standard, he's going to make the Hall of Fame someday. And we recognize as a consensus that he is a great player. The question is, how great? You know, yes, especially in a season where he had 1,871 yards in 2015, along with a Pro Bowl nod and All-Pro selection. And then also another season with 1,677. Still, you just would have loved to see him haul in a bit more touchdowns. And I guess for a while there, at least 3 years in a row, you could say that he was truly a top 2 receiver. I would say that in the early 2010s, leading up to around, 2018, after that season, he was most likely a top 10 receiver. But he really reached the top 2 peak for around 3 years in a row. Even then, when looking at the likely candidate for the 1 or 2 slot, you'd have to compare that time span with Antonio Brown. And some would argue that he produced just a little bit more in terms of a well-rounded standpoint. So, I mean, if you like touchdowns being scored, you would probably go with Antonio Brown. And he also had, despite being at a little bit of an disadvantage in height, he had a physical element to his game as well. If you would prefer that, I guess Antonio Brown's your guy. And then Julio Jones, if you have a commanding physical presence as your preference at wide receiver, that would be your guy. So, I don't know. What I will say that helps him, though, compared to a guy like Antonio Brown, even if you want to argue that Antonio Brown was a little better, I haven't heard a damn thing about Julio Jones. Literally. This news about him retiring was the very first thing I heard about him in a while. Now, granted, he might be an individual that just keeps to himself, but I guess in this day and age, the NFL is definitely going to take all these controversies and stuff seriously. And with what the hell is going on with Antonio Brown right now, even with him having a chance to get in, they're not putting him in. They are not putting him in. Yes, we are talking about just football here, and when he played, you can't deny that he was great. But they're definitely going to take all of these existential things into account, and the man has just done too much outside of the game. Also, the way that he left the game. I mean, yes, Julio left a little bit to be desired, by, having that much regression at that point. But, that can't necessarily be controlled. That's a natural process. Antonio Brown might have seen that slippage too, but he quite literally pieced out during the middle of an NFL game. He pieced out. He removed most of his uniform and dipped in the same sequence. And to this day, even though with all the stuff he's been doing, for whatever reason, he's been begging and pleading at times to get back into the NFL with some teams, he has never appeared in another NFL game since that point. At that particular point of time, right there, even if you want to cast all the controversies to the side because of how great he was, that point right there burned every single bridge imaginable that he would have to have in order to still have a chance to get into the Hall of Fame. I don't know if people who had to deal with that situation are willing to forgive him. I don't know how long that process will take. But I know that at least for a while, you ain't going to hear his name in the finalist pool. You ain't going to hear his name getting called to go to Canton for a speech. You're not. That did it right there. That was the very final straw. I can assure you. Julio Jones does not get himself into these situations where he's the center of attention for any reason in particular. He really does keep a low profile. But honestly, that's better than just being in consistent trouble with so many different parties. So that he could use that to his advantage, potentially. Again, first ballot Hall of Famer. He is already a member of the Hall of Fame All 2010s team. I mean, I guess, with him making this retirement, he'd be eligible in 2030. Let's just see how things stack up. I don't know if he can be a first ballot Hall of Famer right now, but with the way that the guidelines work, it's really just a matter of what individuals are on the ballot for a potential class. Naturally, to make up for some of the decisions they had prior, they're going to include at least a few people from past classes that they just passed up on the opportunity to include. And then they're obviously going to look for a few finalists or so in the current year. So any number of things could happen between now and then. As long as guys like Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, and Marshawn Lynch get their asses in Canton someday over these next few years, that's all. That's all. Especially when you're looking at Marshawn Lynch and Cam Chancellor. Richard Sherman obviously has a great chance, but I believe that his eligibility is going to take a little bit more to kick in, probably within the next couple of years. But you know what? Hey, if it's coming in the next couple of years, get all those three in the same class for the Hall of Fame together. That would be fucking poetic, I'm not gonna lie. Alright, moving on, because the Cowboys would triple down on the stupidity by moving on from Trey Lance and allowing him to be signed as a backup to the Chargers for a 1-year, $6.2 million contract. If anything, I guess it just gives them a decent backup if Justin Herbert does get injured, which has been the case over the past few seasons. So, you can respect the move. It's a short-term deal. You got to prove, if in the event that Justin Herbert even gets injured, you have to prove it. That's all. But the Cowboys, to just acquire Trey Lance for draft compensation, then trade away that draft compensation, and then lose Trey Lance essentially for absolutely nothing. What was even the point of getting him in the first place then? You got nothing back from it. The only thing you have to show for it is something in a different trade. Like there was just no point. Julio Jones would not be the only person to retire, as Terron Armstead would also call it a career after 12 seasons. He's a 5-time Pro Bowler and a second-team All-Pro, making one in 2018. He'd been one of the more respected left tackles over the past decade, but I guess not necessarily great enough to warrant as much recognition as other left tackles at the time we're getting. And oh yeah, speaking of that, we'll get to that in a second. Injuries were yet another catalyst for an early end to a career here in this case. Man, he, with the Dolphins especially, and that last season in New Orleans, he would still produce, but he could not stay healthy at all. And the Dolphins went out and invested this huge sum of money in him. It paid off just a little bit. I mean, 2024 was the culmination of everything. He did play, but oh boy, his mobility, his agility on the line was shot. His pass protection regressed. The run blocking for an offense that was so paltry in terms of average yards per carry. One of the main reasons for that being the case. It's not necessarily the best way to end your career, but you've got to respect him for recognizing when it was time to just call it one, rather than continue to go through this cycle of playing hurt and not necessarily being able to give your best. Alright. He literally would not be the only player to retire. Patrick Peterson would do the same. Now, things look a little bit different for this guy. I mean, his years, pretty much most of his seasons with the Cardinals were great seasons. Just through and through. And over the course of this time, he was just recognized as one of the best, if not the best to some people, cornerback in the league at the time. There's no debate about that whatsoever. Straight up. He was a true shutdown cornerback. And he also had the ability to be a pretty damn good return specialist at times as well. So that kind of versatility to just play people all over a half of the field in multiple positions on a particular defense, while also having good ball skills, while also just having great speed. Literally the perfect cornerback. The thing with Patrick Peterson, though, is that, I mean, he did suffer a few injuries, for sure. But really, this is a matter of just aging out. Simply put, he just did not have the same kind of firepower that he possessed in these other stops. I mean, it did start to tail off when he left the Cardinals, but especially when he got to the Vikings and then the Steelers in his final, what would be his final season in the NFL, he just did not have the same juice. Simply put. You couldn't have asked for a better start to a career. 8 straight Pro Bowl appearances and 3 All-Pro first team selections sprinkled in there. Also a member of the Hall of Fame All 2010s team, as he rightfully deserves to be. I mean, even with that hot start, it's a very lackluster finish, even though he did have 5 interceptions and 66 tackles, along with 15 pass deflections in his second year in Minnesota. Still, though, I don't know. Like, when looking at his Hall of Fame chances, he's definitely got a great shot to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. It's really just, contingent on what they're looking for. Are they looking at his entire body of work? Or are they going to give merit to his first 8 NFL seasons because of how great he was? Like the fact that we can call those his true prime years, whereas most corners will have at least a couple or 3 straight seasons of dominance. The fact that he had at least 5 or 6, you could say, is abnormal for most cornerback talent. Even if they did come so early, they're so damn great that you may just not be able to look past that. You're probably going to give him a slight pass straight in just off of that alone. So we'll see about that. He will also be eligible in 2030, along with Julio Jones. The Bears would sign Kyler Gordon, their slot cornerback, to a 3-year, $40 million contract extension worth $31.25 million guaranteed. And they would also re-sign TJ Edwards to a 2-year, $20 million extension. I'll focus this more so on Kyler Gordon because he was a pick at the cornerback position that at the time some people did begin to question. At the same time, with his contributions last year being a part of a defense alongside Jalen Johnson that just made life a living hell for most of the opponents they faced, you can't deny that. And, Johnson and Gordon have something going here. I mean, quite seriously, these quarterbacks didn't dare throwing the ball to his side of the field. So that would certainly explain the fact that he didn't catch a single interception last year. And yet he had 75 total tackles. He had 4 tackles for loss. He had a half a sack. He had multiple quarterback hits. And he still had 5 pass deflections with 3 fumble recoveries. And also a forced fumble. Not the traditional shutdown cornerback. But at the same time, with what he's doing for them on the field, I can see why they would make that move. He is exactly 25 years old. He will be 26 in the later stretch of the season. And then TJ Edwards was initially a free agent signing that I didn't understand because his time with the Eagles left a little bit to be desired to me. But however, in Chicago over these past 2 years, he's combined for 284 tackles, including 155 in 2023. He also had 12 tackles for loss last year. He had 6 quarterback hits with 4 sacks, the most in his career, 3 pass deflections, and a forced fumble, 2 fumble recoveries, and also an interception. In a season that appeared to just have many good linebackers around the league, his season was one that did stand out, so you'll give him the credit for that. For sure. Like, he's going to be smack dab in the middle of his prime right now, so, it makes sense to give him a short-term deal like that. And again, he could stick around for a little longer if he does continue to produce for you. Terron Smith. One could argue that pretty much the main reason why a guy in Terron Armstead didn't really get much love like that was, for one, because, when you also are sharing an offensive line with a guy in Jahri Evans that is regarded as one of the best guards to ever play the position and who is also on Hall of Fame trajectory. If he isn't in at this point of time, I believe he is. No, he's not. But he's also on Hall of Fame path. So you're sharing a line with that guy. And then you also have to deal with how consistent Terron Smith was throughout the stretch in his career. Oh, yeah. He would retire after 15 seasons, most of them spent with the Cowboys. And then also yes, we've got to talk about his time as a New York Jet because it just wasn't bad. It was bad. What am I saying? Jumbling my words up here. But realistically speaking, man, combination of everything. You're talking about injuries. You're talking about just bad play from the Jets in general. So this was not necessarily a season, a farewell season for the ages. But by that point, he'd lost too much. Literally, there were multiple seasons here. Even though he was still producing to an extent with the Cowboys, the fact that in multiple games, or in multiple seasons, he played just 2 games in 4 games, respectively. So injuries were definitely creeping in no matter how you slice it. But still, in his prime years as a left tackle for the Cowboys, damn near unmatched. Some of the best offensive line play you will ever fucking see from an entire team. Like, that whole squad was a fucking bomb squad. You had him, you had Zach Martin, and don't forget Travis Frederick holding it down for that offensive line. They were a force to be reckoned with. Multiple running backs were able to produce in that system. You talk about Darren McFadden. You talk about DeMarco Murray. You talk about Ezekiel Elliott. In the early stretch of his career. Bro, just through and through. Even Tony Pollard had a couple of seasons that were really good for the Cowboys overall. Like that kind of production across multiple running back rooms doesn't go unnoticed. And it clearly didn't. he nabbed 7 straight Pro Bowl appearances and also got an 8th one in 2021. He had also received 4 straight All-Pro nods, with 2 of those being first-team nods. And then also in 2023, in his final season with Dallas, acquired a second-team All-Pro nod. So, man, so many players just bowing out. But once more, as a lot of the other guys mentioned here, he will also become eligible in 2030. If he were to get in at the same time as Zach Martin, that would also be something that would be very intriguing. I could see it, though. Tyreek Hill will get himself into a situation, multiple situations. For one, he had a domestic dispute of some kind. I don't know why he is always getting himself into one. This has got to cease. It's just like, at this point, man, you got to tighten up. I legitimately don't know what to say. This shouldn't be an annual thing at this point. It's getting to a point where it's pretty fucking sad. Like, come on, man. You can't keep doing this. And then he would also play around with the idea of being traded on draft day or potentially at some point so that the Dolphins can try to get themselves in a stage where they can rebuild efficiently. It is possible, I suppose. Terrion Arnold would change his jersey number officially to number 6, honoring the late Khyree Jackson, who did tragically pass away in mere months following the NFL draft last year, before he was even able to take a snap in the NFL. Still remains one of the saddest situations any player can find themselves in. And you were certainly hoping that his family at this time is still, all well and doing their best to handle this situation, because it's certainly going to be tough on them the most, seeing as they know him the most. But he also was able to make a pretty good amount of friends along the way. Some of them do happen to play football, especially when you look at the Vikings roster. I mean, bro, they got to know him leading up to training camp and all of that, and just like that, he's no longer with them. So they handled that as well as they could have as well. And it's definitely a commendable move on the part of Arnold. Hey, the only thing to do now is, Terrion Arnold has been playing pretty well. So, to keep that going as a tribute to Jackson sounds like a great idea. I have no problem with that whatsoever. The Bills would sign Tre'Davious White to a 1-year deal after letting him go last offseason. You move on from him to just get him back? Okay. Ryan Ramczyk would also retire after 8 seasons. Another former Saints tackle, calling it a career. He had been a one-time All-Pro, first team All-Pro in 2019, and also got AP second team nods in 2018 and 2020. He just dealt with a culmination of things, to be honest. Yes, he was he spent his whole career with the Saints to this point. They largely weren't going anywhere, even with him producing at the level that he was. And then he had a pretty debilitating injury last season that probably ended up hurting his chances to even return if he wanted to. Like, he did not play the entire 24 season. So, given that, I guess he went to try and negotiate something with the Saints. Can't really assume if that was the case or if anything was said in particular. But whatever happened was ultimately enough to motivate him to just move on from everything. And that'll do it for these particular developments. But I will go over a few transactions that have happened recently. So, to start things off, I probably got to go a little further back. Okay, let me see. Because it has been a while since I've made this last video. Okay, hold on. Alright, let me get this set up. Because there's a lot to go into. Okay. So, the Titans would re-sign special teamer Justin Hardy. I believe he did make a Pro Bowl in one of these past few years as a special teamer. So I guess credit to them for at least capitalizing on that opportunity. As far as some other signings go, though, you would have, in chronological order from April 1st, the Browns would pick up special teamer DeAndre Carter from the Bears. The Eagles would pick up Matt Pryor from the Bears. The Chargers would re-sign Tony Jefferson Sr. The Broncos would take away Sam Ehlinger from the Colts on April 2nd. The Jets would re-sign Xavier Newman-Johnson on the 2nd. On April 3rd, the Bears would sign Miles Boykin and Shaun Wade. They would move on from Jay Curran, and he would be taken up by the Cardinals. The Cardinals would also sign Kelvin Beachum Jr. to a deal. On April 4th, the Bears would sign Case Keenum away from the Texans as a backup. I guess good mentor to Caleb Williams, if anything. I guess I can see that. The Broncos would re-sign Andrea Tillman. The Packers would re-sign Aaron Mosby to start off April 7th. The Raiders would also re-sign Charles Snowden. The Falcons would take back Dee Alford. I don't. He is just not a good cornerback. I don't know if I like that move. The Steelers would also re-sign Calvin Anderson. The Broncos would re-sign Lucas Kroll. The Bears would re-sign Jonathan Ford, Amir Speed, Bill Murray, and Daniel Hardy. The Browns would sign Blake Whiteheart also. The Chiefs would sign Janarius Robinson away from the Raiders as well on April the 8th. And then the Bears would sign Nashawn Wright as a special teamer and I suppose backup corner. The Browns would sign Winston Reed. The Chargers would... Well, I alluded to that. Never mind. On April 9th, the Seahawks would re-sign Brady Russell. The Bengals would sign Joe Giles-Harris. On April 11th, the Rams would re-sign Troy Reeder. The Falcons would re-sign Kevin King as a backup cornerback. The Eagles would take a chance on Terrace Marshall Jr. and take him away from the Raiders as a backup wide receiver. The Commanders would take on Josh Johnson once again on the 11th as well. The Broncos would sign Sam Franklin Jr. away from the Panthers. The Colts would re-sign Mo Alley Cox. On April 14th, the Packers would sign John Fitzpatrick. The Browns would take Julian Okwara away from the Cardinals. On April 15th, the Steelers would re-sign Max Sharping. And the Seahawks would get back Drew Lock as a backup quarterback. I think it's respectable, but at that point, if you're going to have Drew Lock in there I don't necessarily like Sam Howell being in that quarterback room still. So they gotta figure something out with him. I don't want that. No more. No more. The Cowboys would also sign Sadiq Charles. And then I suppose that the Cowboys did re-sign Terron Smith on a one-day contract, given the fact that he retired. But, man, it would have been much better for him to just, not spend that season in New York and just retire as a full-on Cowboy through and through. The Bengals would sign Logan Woodside as well on April 17th, yesterday. The Titans would sign away Lismeka Udo from the Saints. They would also pick up Sam Mustipher and Brendan James from the Chargers. The 49ers would sign Jake Tonjes. The Cowboys would take away Hakeem Adeniji from the Browns, and the 49ers would also re-sign Austin Pleasance. There hasn't been anything new today in terms of transactions. So that appears as though that'll do it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.